Hi guys, Mimi G here and welcome back to my channel. So I recently just released 2 new patterns for early spring. Pattern 9043 with Simplicity, which is a men's pant. For that sew along, you can find it in the description box below. But today we're going to be sewing 9052, which is my latest unisex pattern. I'm so excited to do this jacket, so let's get started. Now, if you're new to sewing or you just need a refresher course, you can find the Sewing Basics video in the description box below. Watch that, then come sew along with me. If you need further help or you need to learn to sew, please visit sewitacademy.com. All right, guys, let's go over everything we're gonna need. So we're working on 9052. This is a unisex pattern with a detachable hood. For the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to do view B with the hood. So on the back of the envelope, just to remind you, there is a list of suggested fabrics that you can buy. You can make this out of a lot of things: denim, cotton, poplin, twill. I mean, you could really just be very creative with this. As far as notions go, you're going to need the following. For view B, which is the one we're doing, you're going to need 16 buttons. You're going to need 2 zippers. You're going to need a 36-inch separating zipper. You're also going to need a 12-inch separating zipper for the hood. Now, I couldn't find a 12-inch separating zipper, so I'm just going to shorten mine. You're also going to need 4 yards of 5/8 of an inch ribbon. This is actually 7/8 of an inch ribbon because I don't have 5/8 here, but that's all right. We're going to make do. Now let's go over all of the pattern pieces you need to cut. Okay, you're going to need to cut pattern piece number 5, which is our lower flap. You're going to cut 4 of fabric and 2 of interfacing. You're going to cut pattern piece number 3, which is our upper flap, and you're also going to cut out 4 of fabric and 2 of interfacing. Then pattern piece number 13 is our tab. You're going to cut 4 of fabric and 2 of interfacing. For our pockets, you're going to cut pattern piece number 4, which is our lower pocket. You're going to cut 2. Pattern piece number 2 is our upper pocket. You're also going to cut 2. For the back panel of our jacket, you're going to cut out pattern piece number 7, which is the back facing. You're going to cut 2. You're also going to cut pattern piece number 8, which is the back panel, and you're also going to cut 2. For our collar, you're going to cut out pattern piece number 2. You're going to cut 2 of fabric on the fold and 2 of interfacing. You're going to cut out pattern piece number 14, which is our front placket. You're going to cut 1 of fabric and 1 of interfacing. You're going to cut out pattern piece number 9, which is our underlap. You're also going to cut 1 of fabric and 1 of interfacing. For our sleeve, you're going to cut out pattern piece number 12. This is our sleeve band. You're going to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of interfacing. You're also going to cut out your sleeve, which is pattern piece number 11, and you're going to cut 2 of fabric. For our hood, you're going to cut out pattern piece number 16. You're just cutting 1 of fabric and 1 of lining. This is the center hood part. Then for the hood, you're going to cut 4. You're going to cut either 2 of lining and 2 of fabric, or all 4 from the same fabric. And the last 2 is pattern piece number 6, which is the back. You're going to cut 2. And you're going to cut pattern piece number 1, which is the front. You're also going to cut 2. Now, because we're doing pockets and flaps, please make sure that you mark all of your dots and your notches, because it's going to help you put all of this together. Now, once you have everything cut and interfaced, we can start sewing. All right, we're going to start working on our front. So we're going to prep our pockets. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to take your pocket right side facing up, and you're going to fold along that fold line. I want you to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance on either side. Now, I take my 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and I stitch all the way down across the bottom and up the other side. So when I'm pressing it, I know exactly where to press. You're going to do that for both your pockets. All right, once you turn your pocket right side out, poke out your corners, press along the stitching line that you created, and then go ahead and top stitch. I went ahead and did that to both my pockets. Now we're going to go ahead and pin these onto the front. So first, go ahead and grab your upper pocket, and you should have made all of your markings so you know exactly where to place it. And I'm going to go ahead and pin it in place. I'm going to take my bottom pocket, I'm going to do the same thing. Now, once you have both pockets pinned in place, you're going to go ahead and edge stitch around your pocket, both sides and along the bottom. You're going to do this same exact thing to the other 2 pockets and your other front. All right, guys, now that we have both pockets sewn onto the front and you did the other one the same way, we're going to start working on our flaps. Now, with right sides facing, Go ahead and pin one side. And you're going to stitch down and across the bottom using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then I want you to trim your corners. You're going to do the same thing for your upper and your lower flaps. Once you sew your flaps, I want you to turn them right side out. Now you have the option of top stitching the way I've done here and make your buttonhole. You're going to make your buttonhole according to however the instructions are for your specific sewing machine. You're going to do the same thing for the other remaining top and bottom flaps. All right, once you have your flaps sewn, we're going to go ahead and stitch them in place. So you're going to go ahead and place them right where your dots are. I'm going to place a pin to hold it. Now we're going to head to the sewing machine. You're going to stitch along the bottom edge using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then we're going to turn our pocket over and top stitch. Okay, you're going to back stitch at the beginning and at the end. Then you're going to turn your flap down. And you're going to top stitch. You're going to do the same thing to your other flaps. Okay guys, now that we have our pocket sewn down, we're going to start working on our right front and doing our zipper. So go ahead and separate your zipper. And we're going to start by placing our zipper pull face down. I have 2 zipper pulls in case you're wondering. I like the 2 zipper pulls because it lets me open my jacket from the top and at the bottom. That's just a personal preference, but if yours just has the 1 zipper pull, that's fine. Okay, you're gonna go ahead and pin. I'm gonna pin at the bottom first because I wanna make sure that my zipper starts and stops exactly where it needs to. And I'm just going to pin. So we have a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance at the neckline, so this will just get cut off after. Now I want you to go to the sewing machine and you're just going to baste this down using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so I'm just using a basting stitch, which is just whatever longest stitch you have available on your machine. And I've placed my zipper foot just to make sure that I don't hit my zipper teeth. And you just want to keep the edge of your zipper tape along the raw edge of your fabric. All right, once you have your right zipper basted in place, you're gonna go ahead and do the same exact thing with the left side. Remember that your zipper teeth should be facing the inside of your jacket and the raw edge of your fabric should be along the zipper tape. Make sure and place it exactly where it needs to be, matching your dots, and you're going to baste it in place. All right, guys, once you have your zipper stitched to both sides, we're gonna go ahead and grab our underlap, which is pattern piece number 9. Pattern piece number 9, you're gonna fold it in half, and we're going to stitch the bottom, across the bottom, and also across the top. You're gonna use 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then I want you to turn this right side out, poke out your corners, and give it a press. I've gone ahead and pressed my underlap, and I also basted the raw edges together to keep it in place. Now we're gonna place it over the zipper tape. You're matching the same dots that you did for your zipper, and you're going to baste it, again using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm just gonna pin it. Now go ahead to your machine and baste this in place. Okay, so I have gone ahead and basted my underlap to my jacket. Now we're gonna go ahead and cover our raw edge using the ribbon. I was able to find some 5/8 of an inch ribbon in my stash, so I've switched. Now what we're gonna do is we're going to be stitching and basically just matching the stitching line that we already did. We're gonna sew through all layers. I'm gonna be placing the edge of my ribbon along the stitching line that I see. And I'm just gonna pin in a couple of places. Your ribbon is gonna extend all the way down to the bottom. Now, once you have it all pinned in place, you're gonna go to your machine and you're going to edge stitch along your ribbon. Now you're gonna go slow and you're going to just edge stitch, sort of following where that little stitching line is. Okay guys, so there is no stitching visible on the top because we did it all within our seam allowance. Now we're gonna go ahead and top stitch this in place. So we're gonna now stitch along the edge of the other side of the ribbon, which will then encase all of the raw edges. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and start at the bottom. We're gonna work our way up, stitching along the edge. Okay, you should have a really nicely finished zipper and underlap. You'll see what the underside looks like. Now we're gonna do the same thing for the left side, so let me just show you. We're going to use the same method to cover these raw edges. So just like we did before, you're gonna grab your ribbon, you're going to place it exactly where we did before, you're going to edge stitch it, and then you're going to turn it over and top stitch. The same exact thing we just did for the right front. Now that we have finished the zipper install for our front, we're gonna go ahead and sew our placket. So I'm gonna set this aside for just a sec. You're gonna grab pattern piece number 14. Now you should have also marked your buttonholes, so make sure that you did that. We're gonna go ahead and fold it in half, and just like we did our underlap, we're going to stitch across the top and also across the bottom using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to turn it right side out, poke out your corners, and give it a press. Okay guys, I went ahead and basted my raw edges and I did my buttonholes. Now we're gonna go ahead and place this on the left front. So with right sides facing, you're going to place it over the left front, and you're going to place your stitching that you have, your basting stitching, which is 3/8 of an inch away from your edge, right over where the stitching, your top stitching is. And you're going to match up your dots and you're gonna pin in place. You're gonna go ahead and stitch this in place through all layers. Okay, I went ahead and stitched my placket down and I pressed it towards the front. Now we're gonna go ahead and top stitch 3/8 of an inch from the fold, and you're gonna notice that that's going to encase the raw edge that you see on the inside. Now once you have top stitched your placket in place and you went ahead and encased your raw edges, we can set this aside and we're gonna work on our back pieces. Now I'm gonna go ahead and take my back pieces and I'm gonna serge the raw edge first before sewing them together because we're going to be turning this and creating a casing for the drawstring. And although you could snip into it and flat fell the seam, I like it for it to lay very nice and flat, and I want to be able to turn over to create my casing. My fabric is a little bit thick, so I don't want to double fold, but that is up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and serge my raw edges, and then after I do that, I'm going to place them right sides facing. And we're going to stitch together from the top down to where you reach your dot. So you should have marked a little dot. You're going to stop and back stitch at the dot. Okay guys, so I press my seams open. I'm going to top stitch along one side and then cross over and go down the other side. Now, if you did it the way the instructions say, then this is probably all to one side. You could snip right at your dot and then double fold, but like I mentioned, my fabric is pretty thick, so I'm not going to double fold. So for me, it's just a cleaner look to stitch, go across, and then work my way down. I went ahead and did my top stitching for the vent. Now we're gonna go ahead and work on our back. So we're gonna be grabbing our back panel and the back facing. We'll start with the facing. Now, make sure that you have transferred all of your dots and your notches because you're gonna need to align them. Right sides facing, you're going to place them matching your notch, and we're going to pin in place. Once you have them pinned in place, you're going to go ahead and you're going to stitch using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, once you've stitched them in place, I want you to go ahead and clip into the curve. You're going to understitch. So you're going to pull this over to one side, you're going to understitch. Then I want you to press the entire thing to the inside. Okay, once it's pressed to the inside, we're going to go ahead and lay our back panel piece over the top. You're going to match your notch, and we're going to pin just between the facing and the back panel. Now using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're going to sew these together. All right guys, once it's sewn together, go ahead and press everything nice and flat. I have gone ahead and pinned. Now we're gonna stitch through all layers. I've pinned through all layers to keep it in place. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the guide where my stitching is. And that's gonna give me a nice finished on the front. Now you could baste it and then stitch from the right side and remove your basting. You have that option. But I'm just gonna go ahead and follow my existing stitching so that I know it's gonna be nice and even. And that's gonna create this really nicely finished vent for the back. Okay, once you've given this a good press, we're gonna go ahead and stitch our shoulders together. So grab one of your fronts, pin along your shoulder. Now you're going to stitch across using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to pin your other shoulder and stitch it the same way. Okay, once you have your shoulder sewn, we're going to go ahead and work on the zipper for the hood. I've separated my 12-inch separating zipper. We're going to grab the one that has the zipper pull, and with the zipper pull face down, you're going to place and pin it between the 2 dots that you should have marked onto your fabric. You're going to place the zipper tape edge along the raw edge of your fabric, and you're just going to pin. Okay, now you're just going to head to your sewing machine and you're going to stitch this down using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. If your zipper tape is extending, you're going to go ahead and just pin it out of the way and stitch from one end to the other end using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once we have our zipper pull stitched down, we're going to go ahead and grab our collar. So set your jacket aside for a minute. Now on the non-interfaced collar, I want you to press up 3/8 of an inch, and we're going to place them right sides facing, and we're going to stitch using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance across both sides and across the top. Okay, I have gone ahead and turned my collar right side out, and I have given it a good press. Now we're going to go ahead and pin it to our neckline. So you want to match up your notches and pin. I'm going to pin the top of my collar out of the way so when I'm stitching I don't accidentally get it caught. Okay, once you have it pinned in place, you're gonna go ahead and stitch using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so once you have your collar stitched down, you're gonna go ahead and pin the other side down. You're going to place the folded edge of your collar right along that stitching line and pin. You could do this several ways. You could pin on the wrong side and try and stitch, but remember that you have that zipper there, so it's probably easiest and safest to slip stitch this closed. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pin it in place. Once you have it pinned, go ahead and slip stitch this closed, and we're gonna get started on our hood. All right, guys, once you have slip stitch your collar, you're gonna set this aside. We're gonna sew our hood. So go ahead and grab your hood and the center part of your hood. You also have this cut out of lining, so you're gonna sew your lining pieces the same way I'm gonna show you here. So we're going to first start with one side, and we're going to pin. Make sure to match up your notches. It'll make this much easier. Once you have one center stitch to one side of the hood, you're gonna go ahead and sew this using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then you're going to pin the other part of the hood to the other side the same way. All right, guys, now we're gonna do the other side of the zipper. You're gonna do this the same way that you did it when we attached it to the jacket. So the end of my zipper is between my dots, so you wanna make sure, just like we did before, that you are working within your markings. Okay, so make sure that the end of the zipper is in the right place and that you go ahead and try to zip this onto your jacket just to make sure that you have it correct and that you don't have the zipper end on one of the wrong ends. You wanna make sure that it fits and slides on easily to your jacket. Now go ahead and stitch down using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now once you have it stitched onto your hood, you should be able to attach it to your jacket. So I'm gonna go ahead and zip it. Now we're gonna go ahead and do the lining the same way. So you're gonna grab your 3 hood pieces and you're gonna sew them together the same exact way. Once you do that, we will go ahead and place our lining and our hood together. Okay, so I have my hood right side out and I have my lining wrong side out. I'm gonna put my hood inside of my lining and we're just gonna go ahead and pin. Make sure you match up your seam lines. Okay, I'm gonna pin just short of where our zipper starts because that's where we're going to stop our stitching. Now we're gonna go ahead and stitch around our hood using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm gonna start at the center and work my way down and stop right where my pin is, which is, like I said, about 1/4 of an inch from where my zipper is starting and ending. And then I'm gonna start back in the center and work my way over to the other side, again, stopping just short of where my zipper is. Once you stitch all the way around, you're gonna go ahead and trim your corners, poke out any corners that you need to, and then you're going to slip stitch the opening closed. So once you're done turning it right side out, just press and pin, and again, you're going to slip stitch that closed. Now, for me, I much rather prefer to stitch this closed using my sewing machine. So I'm just gonna show you. A second option is for you to leave a small opening in the lining of your hood. Then you're going to stitch this closed with your sewing machine. And then once you're done with that, turn your hood right side out, and then you can just close that small opening with your sewing machine. Okay, so I went ahead and turned my hood right side out. I gave it a press, and as you can see, I just have a small opening in the lining of my hood. So I'm just gonna take that opening, take it to the sewing machine, and just edge stitch it closed. You could also slip stitch this closed, which is much smaller than trying to slip stitch the entire zipper opening. Okay, once your detachable hood is on, or if you want it off, just unzip it. We're gonna go ahead and attach our sleeve. So you're gonna grab your sleeve, you're going to make sure that you've transferred all of your dots and your notches, and you're just gonna pin. If you need to ease in some of the sleeve cap, just make some cuts into your jacket. Now you're going to head to the sewing machine and you're just going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then you're going to do the other sleeve the same way. All right, once you have done both of your sleeves, we're going to go ahead and pin and sew our side seams. So I like to match my underarm seam first and then pin together the rest of your sleeve, match all of your notches. Okay, you're going to head to your sewing machine and in one continuous stitch, you're going to start at your hem, you're going to sew up and then down your sleeve. You're going to be using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now that our side seams are sewn, you can go ahead and grab your cuff. We're going to fold your cuff in half and we're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, now along the unnotched edge, you're gonna go ahead and turn and press a 1/2 inch. We're gonna go ahead and slip our sleeve into the cuff. You're gonna match your underarm seam and you're going to pin. I'm gonna pin one more time, matching that notch. Now you're gonna go ahead and you're going to stitch around using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, once you attach your cuff, you're going to turn it so that the folded edge meets your stitching line and you're going to slip stitch this close. You also have the option of pinning from the right side, making sure that you're catching the underneath and then stitching in the ditch. You're gonna do the same thing for the other cuff. Okay, I want you to go ahead and grab your tab. You're going to place right sides facing and using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're going to stitch down the side, down the bottom and up the other side. We're going to turn this right side out and give it a good press. Now, once you turn your tab right side out, poke out your corners and give it a press. We're gonna go ahead and top stitch 3/8 of an inch away from the edge. Okay, once you turn it right side out, poke out your corners, give it a good press. I went ahead and did top stitching and I also did my buttonhole. Now we're gonna go ahead and sew it onto our sleeve. So you should have 2 little dots where you're going to place your tab. I'm just gonna give a little pin in the middle and you're just going to sew this down. Once it's sewn down, you're going to turn it over and top stitch. Okay, the last 2 things for us to do is to create the casing for our waist and to do the hem. So let's start by grabbing whatever ribbon you're going to be using so that we can create our casing at the waist. You should have marked a line along the waistline where we're going to be placing this. I'm going to fold the inside. I'm going to fold to the inside. I'm actually using bias, just opened up instead of folded. And I'm going to place it along the line. Now, once you have it pinned down, we're going to be stitching very close to the edge along the top and then working our way back down the edge of the other side. The front stays open so that we can put our waist cord through one side and out the other. All right, once you have your casing stitched down, you're gonna go ahead and grab your cording or ribbon, whichever one you're using, and you're going to put a safety pin through the end of it so you can sift it through one side and out the other. Now you can go ahead and create a knot at the end. If you have the dowels, you can use those. Those are awesome. I'm just gonna make a little knot at the end. You can adjust for length once you try your jacket on, but this is just to avoid your cording getting back into your casing. Okay, all that's left for us to do is to do the hem of our jacket. So I have already pressed up my hem allowance. Now you could turn under an inch and then fold over the 1 inch. However, I'm just serging my edges because like I mentioned earlier, my fabric is a little thick, so I don't want to add too much to the bottom hem. So I just went ahead and serged off the 1/4 inch and turned up my 1 inch allowance. I grabbed my cord. You're gonna need 2 pieces, 1 for each side. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna tack it down to the edge where the hem is. We're gonna tack it in place so it doesn't move, and then we're gonna go ahead, turn over our allowance, and then stitch that down. All right, guys, once you've inserted your cord on each side, you can go ahead and pull it and tie it however you want, or you could just leave it loose. The only thing left for you to do is to go ahead and attach all of your buttons. So if you already opened your buttonholes up, make sure you're gonna place your buttons exactly where they're supposed to be, and then you're going to sew buttons onto all 4 of your flaps, of course, all the way down the middle. You're going to add one to your tab on your sleeves, and don't forget your hoodie. After you've done that, you are all done. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this sew along. As usual, please follow on Instagram at MimiGStyle. And if you make and post this jacket, please use hashtag MimiGPatterns. Until next time, peace.